launching drones and missiles, Israel returning fire, and a barrage coming from the US. But there is also a war of words going on here, because Iran says it will not let any oil through the Middle East if the US and Israel continue attacking. Donald Trump is threatening now more severe strikes at Tehran. So as far as the Straits of Hormuz is concerned, who's really got the upper hand there?
Well, at the moment, without a doubt, Iran has got the upper hand. It's effectively been able to control the Strait of Hormuz. As viewers would know, this is just this little promontory of land where the UAE is, with this very tiny little gap, which is completely dominated on the other side by the Iranian coast. So, how Donald Trump wants to sort of smash through that is unclear. I noticed that the Pakistani military are now escorting their commercial shipping in the Gulf, but I don't think anybody's suggesting that they're going to try to force their way through the strait. So it's a very difficult situation, given 20% of the world's oil flows through that tiny gap in the Gulf.
Yeah, so if this blockade does continue, Laura, would this trigger the other Arab nations towards less diplomacy and more direct confrontation with Iran? Even countries like Qatar that have said that they feel betrayed by Iran.
Look, I think they're in a really tough position here. I mean, none of them wanted this war. None of them have particularly, strong sentiment towards the regime in Tehran, but they also see this. People will say to you here, look, this is essentially Israel's war. And I think that reflects the fact that they don't want to be siding with Israel on this in this conflict either. So they're really stuck in the middle and facing the possibility that the unknown here is what might happen to the Houthis, who are to the south of where we are now. Just as Israel's facing sort of incomings from both Lebanon and Iran, the Gulf countries could face incoming from both Iran and from Yemen into the south.
Yes, and Iran's military is obviously nowhere a big power as the US. But from what you've observed since this conflict broke out, what is Tehran's overall strategy, and do you see anything changing with the new supreme leader?
Well, I think that the real message of the new leader coming in is that nothing's going to change. Anybody who thought that, as some commentators have said, that Donald Trump could get a Venezuela, that is, that there'd be some player in the regime who would be able to take over, that's all been wiped out. The regime is locked into the confrontation till the death. And their strategy quite clearly is to, as we've seen, maximise the damage on neighbouring countries around the region, and through that hit the world oil market and the world economy. Now, I think their first impression of that was, or their first intention of that was, to hope that the Gulf states would pressure America to pull back. Now, that's not going to happen. All that they've managed to do is all that Iran has managed to do is alienate the Gulf states. So I still don't think that they will get involved, but it's certainly also a miscalculation on Iran's part, that they thought that they could use this to get a quick outcome for the war, just as Donald Trump seemed to be presuming that if he was able to eliminate the supreme leader, that the Iranian regime would fall over.
Okay, Global Affairs editor Laura Tingle in Dubai. Thanks very much for your analysis.
Thanks, Girish.
Well, from India to South Korea, the surge in oil prices has prompted governments in Asia to resort to emergency measures, including closing schools, sending workers home, and even rationing fuel for cremations.
In the Indian state of Maharashtra, these furnaces are going cold. The closure of 18 crematoria is one of the more grim measures put in place, as the country faces a sharp increase in the price of liquefied petroleum gas.
Because of the break in the supply of commercial LPG, we are discouraging the use of the LPGs.
The fuel spike has also caused concern among locals, who often rely on gas cylinders for cooking.
I came here to buy a cylinder only to find that the price went up by 60 rupees. There is so much inflation. This is creating a lot of problems for us.
Across the border in Bangladesh, fuel rationing has drawn big crowds at the Bowser. At this station, cars are only getting 10 litres of fuel and motorbikes about 2.
The fuel I received is barely sufficient, but the time in the queue is very long. Once the fuel is finished, I'll have to come back again and stand in the queue for hours again.
The government has also closed universities as a means of conserving energy.
Due to the fuel crisis, our university buses are also being shut down from today. Today will be the last day that the buses will be running for the universities.
Pakistan has taken similar measures, closing schools for 2 weeks. They have also ordered 50% of non-essential services staff to work from home.
We hope the public gets some relief for as long as this ongoing war-like situation continues, and we hope this war ends soon.
In South Korea, the fuel price has been capped for domestic use for the first time in 30 years.
Regarding the recent excessive increases in petroleum product prices, we should swiftly introduce and boldly implement a maximum price system.
Thailand has also said it will set limits on fuel prices as Asia tries to weather the crisis. Amanda Robson, ABC News.
Well, fears of shortages have also seen petrol pumps start to run dry across parts of Australia as experts warn of the nation's vulnerabilities.
A servo with no petrol running dry in Texas, Queensland.
It's quite stressful. We're not able to give them fuel and they need fuel.
And no joy here in Whyalla in regional Australia either.
Tanks went dry.
Pumps in Victoria's second biggest city are starting to run dry too.
We've got half a tank just in case.
Actually, I am panicked, so I think some people are going to be panicked too.
Trawlers in Queensland docked without diesel.
The 3 major fuel wharves have no fuel for us and they don't know when they can get it.
The global oil supply shock from the widening war has drivers and industries on edge.
The big message for every Australian is don't panic. The suppliers are there.
But supply is clearly being drained, especially in parts of regional Australia.
We've had up to a month's supply go out, leave the system in a matter of a few days.
Experts predict that Australia has 25 days left in reserve.
If we don't get diesel, it'll disable civil society.
The price of diesel has jumped again to $2.30, while unleaded petrol is up to $2.24 in Darwin, with Perth the cheapest at $1.93. After rocketing past $100 a barrel, oil prices have started to drop back down. US President Donald Trump warning Iran that if it doesn't allow oil to flow, it'll hit Tehran 20 times harder.
If Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. They'll never be able to recover.
There's still oil. It's a supply chain issue, and that directly affects Australia.
We're not just dependent on the Middle East for petrol. Our farmers rely on fertiliser that comes out of the region. Without it, winter crops sown next month could be in jeopardy.
The reality is, in regional communities, they've run out of fuel in these towns. Now, if that happened in a city suburb, they'd be hell to pay.
All of this will push up inflation, from food to petrol pumps, raising the risk of higher interest rates as well. Amelia Turzon, ABC News.
In Victoria, petrol stations will now have to lock in their fuel prices every 24 hours, which the state says will save motorists money. Under laws that came into effect today, every service station must set its fuel price by 2 p.m. each day for the next day's price. That cost cap is in place from 6 a.m., with stations able to lower the price for 24 hours but not increase it. Every petrol station Bowser price is also published online, with Premier Jacinta Allen warning businesses that don't comply face thousands of dollars in fines. Well, nations across the Asia-Pacific are feeling the crunch from this energy shock that came as a consequence of the war in the Middle East. Government workers in the Philippines are being told to come in 4 days a week. Universities in Bangladesh are also being shut in order to reduce energy use and combat rising costs. So what can we expect in the coming days and weeks? Alicia Garcia Herrero is the chief economist for the Asia Pacific at Natixis and joins me now from Taipei. Alicia, welcome back to the program. Now, firstly, how reliant is Asia on receiving goods and oil, pretty much through the Straits of Hormuz?
Very much so, I'm afraid. I can give a few figures. So, China is around 40% of oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz. Japan, South Korea, 60. That it is very high. And as you rightly point out in the intro, it's not only about oil. It's about fertilizers. It's about a lot of other products, especially refined oil in a way or another. It could be plastic, petrochemicals, so we have to realize that this is a massive shock for the global economy, especially if it lasts. It's going to be not only inflationary, but also it's going to hit demand. So that it's a stagflation, as we economists, a typical stagflation type of shock, which is not very welcome by central banks, by the way. Very hard to react to this.
Yes, and given the drastic measures some countries in the region are taking, what does this tell us about the vulnerabilities, particularly of developing countries in Asia, to withstand the shocks in the energy sector when events like a major conflict like this war in Iran do occur?
Yeah. So the reality of things is that oil, crude oil is one thing, and then you have refined oil. And it so happens that you could have an economy like Singapore, tiny place in a way, but very, very well preserved in terms of having enough refinery, actually exporting refined oil. So if you are an exporter of refined oil, what you do is you keep it for yourself. This is what China is doing, by the way. And by doing that, it only, unfortunately, it makes the shock much bigger for those economies, generally poorer countries that can't refine their own oil. So for them, it's a double whammy. It's the oil price, but it's also the access actually to refined oil, which can have dramatic consequences. And this is why we're seeing these reactions in terms of reducing the demand, because there's no other way they can actually access refined oil.
So for countries that can't control things from the supply side, one of the measures that are in place is to cap fuel prices. Is that a wise move from an economic perspective?
So we have had already South Korea announcing caps. South Korea can afford it because it has a rather sound fiscal situation, but most other countries, like if you think of Indonesia, which has a major new expenditure starting last year on the child food, no way they can afford additional subsidies. So most countries, say even the Philippines, constrained. So again, if you don't have the resources, the only thing you can do is to hit your economy. How? This reminds us of COVID, not moving. This is what these countries are doing, reducing mobility. But we know from COVID times that kills the economy.
So as you mentioned earlier, of course, that China is well insulated given its significant oil stockpiles, it's got refineries, but it's still a major buyer of Iranian oil. But so does China need to fill that gap in any way?
So it's a good question. So China has been importing that we know of, and again, a lot of that is, through Malaysia, for example, or through Iraq. So it's basically relabeled oil. But when you come to terms to that relabeled oil, it's around 1 million barrels. Russia, with a very severe increase, which tells that China was getting ready for what was coming, is around 2.07 million. So Iran is half Russia, so it's not insignificant, it's actually very large. Yes. Can Russia take that? Well, to start, Russia has to take more than Iran. It's the whole Strait of Hormuz now that is not flowing, yeah? That's 40% of Chinese imports. So just to give you a sense, Russia is around 20, Iran is 12, and then the Gulf together is 40. So there's no way, in other words, that Russia can mitigate the shock enough. Russia can do a little bit more for China. Bear in mind that Russia also now has to serve India because finally Trump allowed Indians to buy Russian oil. So Russia can't do it all. So in that regard, China will have to tap strategic reserves. We have to, again, close the robinet, for the rest of the world in terms of, or Asian economies in terms of refined oil, and yet still probably reduce its use for industrial production. And by the way, coal at all speed.
Yes, and of course, yes.
Good news for Australia.
Yeah, well, you said that Russia can't do it all, but given that now, like you said, the Trump administration has cleared the way for India to buy Russian oil. Is Moscow emerging as a big winner here, at least from this perspective?
Yeah, Moscow is a winner as far as oil is concerned, both prices, and let's bear in mind that Russia was suffering from a severe fiscal deficit before, so it's very good news for Russia. But at the same time, in a longer term, Russia is losing its upper hand with the global south, and especially with Iran. We had Syria before, we had Venezuela. This is the third hit on Russia's neighborhood, if you want, or Russia's area of influence. And therefore, if the US ends this war properly, let's put it this way, reducing the power of Russia and China on Iran, then Russia is a big loser. So it is a temporary winner, but we don't know whether it will be a permanent winner.
Okay, we saw, of course, a crude oil going back above $100 a barrel. Now it's gone below that level. I think it's about $90. What can we expect? Is it going to be volatile, or do you expect it to go above or below? How would you gaze into that crystal ball?
So I think it will be elevated and volatile. Elevated because it's not only about the Strait of Hormuz. If the Strait of Hormuz opens tomorrow, and that would be, quite positive, obviously, but you already have a reduced production because Saudi, Kuwait, Qatar, they have decided, and Abu Dhabi also, to reduce the production of oil because they can't pile it up. They can't pile it up. It's just too much oil in their tankers. So therefore, they have to, in a way, stop producing or reduce production until the Strait of Hormuz is open. So when it opens, you will still have a lot of sluggish, supply, and therefore the prices will remain more elevated than people think just by looking at the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, Alicia Garcia Herrero there in Taipei. I really appreciate your sharing your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, in a shock announcement, David Littleproud has revealed he's resigning as a leader of the Nationals, but